The question then becomes, how do you influence the quality of classroom practice? What is it that you actually do? With the bottom line being that if I'm currently teaching and practicing to the best of my ability, and they're still not getting it in places where we know it really matters, because it's hard. What do I do about it? The only way I'm going to practice differently is if I understand differently. And we make huge investments in professional learning, and we call professional learning professional development even though they're not the same thing, and I'm going to explain to you why. And in fact, it turns out that the link between professional development and classroom practice is not nearly as robust in the research as the one between classroom practice and student learning and achievement. In fact, what the research tells us is that professional development only has a small to moderate influence on classroom practice, and a very small yet indirect effect on student learning and achievement, yet is the only thing we really have. Because how else do you get better? Now, what it turns out is that really the detail is what matters. What counts as professional learning? That's what matters. Not all professional development is professional learning. And not all professional development and professional learning are created equal. What do we have to do that is within our control to ratchet up the quality of professional learning in ways that will impact on classroom practice and allow us to change it in places where we know we need to? See, I don't want to change things where it works. We do a whole bunch of things that works. You know what we have to just do there? Just keep doing it. That's not what we want to do here. Life's hard enough. There's enough stuff we have to do. Don't go looking to change things that work. But in the places where you say, this matters, I'm doing the best that I can, and there are a bunch of kids who are not getting it, what do I do because I'm already doing my best? That's the piece that really matters. And so what we've been able to do over the last few years is try to understand how do we create the conditions for professional learning, the kind of professional learning that will really, really impact on changed thinking and practice, so that what we do in schools and classrooms is ultimately different. And what we realized is that there were at least 3 very important capacity building enablers that we would work on. And I will explain these to you in a bit more detail a little bit later this morning. They are the notion of a learning focus that defines a what, and a mechanism of collaborative inquiry that challenges thinking and practice that defines the how, and instructional leaders that defines the who. But just when we thought we had it sorted out, we realized that the implementation of these pieces is so unbelievably difficult because all of our work to make them move forward floats in a sea of barriers that impede the real work of learning that it is our job to intentionally interrupt. What does it mean to be part of a PLC? Pretty much everything, and that's the problem. For some of you, it's about reading and sharing articles. For some of you, it's about being a community in the school and using the same terminology. And for some of you, it's about opportunities for continuous dialogue. For some of you, it's about sharing practice. We've done a fair bit of work on learning communities. And what I want to tell you about learning communities is that there is no magic in collaboration. Together is not always better. Sometimes together is worse. I don't want you to believe that there is magic in collaboration. In fact, what the research tells us is that the default practices, in other words, the practices of collaboration, if you just let them happen naturally, are the bad ones. But collaboration can be incredibly powerful if you intentionally create the conditions to engage in it in a particular way, what I'm calling intentional interruption. Number 1, diversity of opinion. Diversity does not make a community weak. Diversity is absolutely the lifeblood of any kind of collaborative learning environment. You need diversity of opinion because it is the raw material through which you will build new understanding. If everybody around the table believes the same thing, how are you going to learn something new? You need people to not. Diversity of opinion matters. Those of you who engage in moderated marking in your buildings know this. Another example of a potential strategy that if we miss the why behind the observable, we screw it up. Is our job to basically hold up a piece of student work and say, who will give me a level 3 on this? Let's get agreement? No, that's not what you want to do. I want to moderate that piece of students' work that's a difficult one. I want to moderate the one where you say it's a summary, I think it's a retell, and we actually figure out how our understanding of why those things are different give rise to our different ideas of whether it should be a 4 or a 3. Because we preserve the diversity of opinion and we use it as a launch pad for deepening our understanding, because that's what professional learning is. Independence. It's got to be close to my classroom. It's got to matter to me. It's got to be decentralized. But diversity of opinion, independence, and decentralization will only make for strong collaboration if there is an aggregation mechanism for bringing it all together. This is not leave me alone and let me do my own thing, thank you very much. It's let me do what matters most to me, closest to where the reality of my life is, where I have an opportunity to explain to you my rationale and my reasons so that you can do the same, and we can collectively build wisdom that we don't have on our own. Why do I say that collaboration is not always a good thing? Sometimes alone is better than together. Well, one thing about any learning community or any network is it will spread anything. The only thing worse than a bad idea is a bad idea in a lot of places. That's the quality control problem. Look at the web. Do a Google search. It doesn't say here is the really good font. It just says here, right? Quality control is a problem in collaborative environments. It makes it easy to spread bad ideas. So that matters. In psychology, we learn that if you put a group of people together in a room and you say, talk about whatever you want, you know what they'll talk about? They'll talk about something that they all agree upon. That's the propensity for groupthink, but it is the enemy of diversity of opinion. Most people will, left to their own devices, talk by defaulting to the lowest common denominator of agreement. People don't say, oh, I know. Let's pick something that we've got different understandings of so that we can challenge one another, right? Which is exactly what good moderated marking would ask you to do. But we don't do that. Another problem that we have in collaborative context is diffusion of responsibility, right? You know this from your old days of social psychology back in the day with the unresponsive bystander, right? You get into trouble and there's an onlooker. Would you rather there's one onlooker or 3 onlookers? And conventional wisdom would always say, well, if 3 people see me get into trouble, I'm 3 times more likely to get helped. Wrong. Because each of those 3 people says, I'm so glad I don't have to do anything because there's 2 others who will. So nobody does anything. When you're the only one, you're like, holy crap, I'm it. You pretty much have to get there and do it. And de-individuation is when we lose our individual identities.